now move on to the last part of our discussion today, the linguistic anthropological part of our discussion. And this builds on from everything that Emile Benveniste said, and it builds onto a contextualization of everything within a linguistic anthropological framework. Okay, so we're going to very quickly recap the enonce and enunciation, and the fact that there is a separation, and also the fact that signification occurs both intrapersonally and interpersonally. And I will say that when we articulate sign and signification, we must focus on whether the signification happens intrapersonally or interpersonally. So we must separate the social and mental or intrapersonal realms. So the social or interpersonal realm suggests that the sign is arbitrary. There's an arbitrary separation within the sign. However, in the intra-individual, the signifier and signified are always one and non-arbitrary. Well, you know, I'm being very positivist here, and I'm saying are, is, and always, which is not the case. I'm just, you know, speaking very roughly, loosely, just to get my point across. But in actual fact, it isn't is. It's just a continuum, and, you know, we push the intra and the inter out as far as possible just to emphasize what we're trying to say. But in actual fact, it's not like that. You know, it's quite contested, and there's tension and everything, and, you know, the intra is sometimes a little that way, the inter is sometimes a little that way, and, you know, both mix and everything, and there is a tension. Okay, so the inter arbitrary, the intra necessary. Relations between the signifier and the sign. So hence the intra-individual and the inter-individual both differ. Now, what does this say? What does this mean? This says that we see an anthropology of linguistics as it semiotically legitimates the individual subject's shifting, not static, but shifting positionality in a relevant respective social field through a totalizing, not partial, but totalizing contingency of the language used. I'm going to now show you a diagram. And if you look at the diagram, you see two sides, the left and the right. At the left, we see the individually appropriated semiotic, and at the right, we see the socially appropriated semiotic. And of course, you know, none of these really exist without the other. So this is just to really emphasize and bring the game home. Okay, so at the left we have our reference signified, and we see that the signifier need not align with social conceptions nor contextual appropriation, and the relationship between the signifier and signified is non-arbitrary, necessary. And the non-arbitrary relationship has greater cognitive stability because it need not shift as much as in the other situation at the right, the socially appropriated semiotic. So at the right we see the socially appropriated semiotic where we have a reference signified, and the signifier must align with social conceptions and contextual appropriation, and hence the relationship between the signifier and the signified becomes arbitrary and a lesser degree of cognitive stability. And we see that between the two there is a tension, primarily because there is no such thing as a non-social appropriation of the semiotic, and there is no such thing as a non-individual appropriation of the semiotic. So if you look to the next diagram, we see that it is separated into two, the top part and the bottom part. And the diagram we saw before with the enonce and enunciation we're representing this here. At the top, we have our non-realization of context. So the top part, there is no context. And of course, this is impossible because there is always context. However, for the sake of understanding the dancer without the dance, we emphasize this. So at the top, we have a nonce. At the bottom, we have our realization or post-realization of interaction with context. And here we have enunciation. So we have not only the speaker who becomes a speaker because of the fact that we also have the spoken to. So the speaker doesn't become until we have a spoken to, and hence there is a negotiation and a discourse according to Eleanor Ochs. So we have enunciation at the bottom and announce at the top. And this, of course, is always in tension and definitely a continuum and never one, not the other. Remember, according to Benveniste, announce is that which is being said, and the enunciation is that which is being said with the introduction of the speaker and the spoken to. We have to acknowledge that we must rethink complex relations between singular social experiences, where speakers and their enunciations are situated, and the static forms of expressions, the announce, without reducing forms of expression prematurely and in a totalizing approach to ideological formations or counterformations. And as we then employ Deictics, we see that when we introduce the I, we see a provision of an inner reference which manifests the presence of the speaker at his enunciation, according to Benveniste. So the introduction of I and the realization of I then produces a discourse where we see an inner reference emerging, and the speaker and the spoken to become present. If we look at the third diagram, once again, a very similar diagram, and we have at the top, we have our non-context, and we look at the, of course, the pronoun I, which is just a pronoun without anything else. I exists, but I do not exist. And this is a nonce. It's that which is being said, without the speaker or the spoken to. However, at the bottom, we see that we have an I and a you. So I am now speaking to you because I am speaking. I cannot be speaking without speaking to you, and you cannot be spoken to without the I being present to speak to you. So you suddenly exist, and hence I now exist. So language emerges all at once. We cannot have part of language and not the other part. Language emerges all at once. And the bottom, of course, constitutes the act of enunciation. The top constitutes the act of announce. And as Benveniste tells us, that dialogically separating the I and the you becomes crucial for categorizing the subjects in discourse. So hence, in and through language, we can see now that the person constructs the self as a subject, because the person subjects themselves to other components, other elements of the language system, of the interaction, of the discourse. That is, the person subjects themselves to the other, and hence language establishes the concept of ego boundaries. So due to a relational importance of the linguistic sign, I becomes representational of the person, you becomes representational of the person, and she, he, they all become representational of the person. Okay, if we go to the next diagram, we see once again the same kind of thing, and this time we have our temporal markers, our temporal deictics, and at the top we have today, without it really meaning today, non-contextual today, and this constitutes the announce case. At the bottom we have our today, which signifies today, and this signifies then that there is a tomorrow or a yesterday or a next week or something. And this becomes a negotiation of sorts, because without today there can be no tomorrow, and without tomorrow there can be no today. And incidentally, the word tomorrow we can break up in two morrows. So 2 days. So tomorrow is actually the second day. Today is the first one, so the day after today becomes the tomorrow. And morrow, of course, if we go back to Middle English and early English and then Greek, we see that the word stem could possibly, very possibly be mera, which is day in Greek. Okay, dimera, tomorrow. Today then emerges as tomorrow emerges, and nothing less, language emerges all at once. And this constitutes a case of enunciation. So once again, the tension between enonce and enunciation is there, and a possible continuum, and definitely not a binary. And hence, deixis becomes a strategy for speaker appropriation of self another cosmologically. So in this way, language creates the person's spatio-temporal, social, psychological designation. So if we look at the next diagram, we see slight complexity there, but we see three different lines. The bottom one, the middle one, and the top one. The bottom one is a set of points, a contour of a set of points, as is the middle one, as is the top one. And this is, remember, this is very simply represented, and of course, in reality, the complexity is far too great to comprehend. The bottom contour, set of points contour, constitutes the social deictic. I, you, at any specific time. Each point becomes that social deictic at any specific time. The middle one constitutes the spatial deictic, here, there, at any specific time, and the top one, the temporal deictic, at any specific time, now, tomorrow, etc. So each point in each dimension connects with another point in each of the others, so to form a certain context, a discursive context. And hence we construct discourse through these deictic oppositions. Without these deictic oppositions, we cannot build our deictics, and hence the landscaping does not occur. So each point in each of the three planes combines with another point from each of the other two planes at any instance, discursive or contextual instance, and hence we see the formation and discursive construction through each of these deictic oppositions. And of course, without the opposition, the deictic cannot emerge. And hence we landscape the discourse or context. So each one of these points in any plane combines with another point in any of the other two planes to form an instance, a discursive or contextual instance, and hence we construct the discourse through deictic opposition. So for example, in the pronoun plane, the I or the you or the they or the she or the he connects with a point or reconnects with a point or something in the spatial and in the temporal plane, and hence we form a certain instance, and then these break up, and then there's a reconnection and a reappropriation and a recontextualization of everything, and we landscape a new discourse. And this is how, of course, how we recontextualize and resituate ourselves continuously in the very dynamic, very fluid order of things in discourse. So the I, for example, is bound to, as we said before, previously, is bound to a singular center of expression. That others I at a specific point in time, and then as somebody else uses this I, then things change. As somebody else then narrates the I, things change, and so forth. The you, the this, the here, there, now, tomorrow, all represent centers of expression, and these centers of expression become the points that constitute the lines or the contours of each of the spatial, the temporal, and the pronoun. And by situating these, we then create our realities within which we communicate and set up our discourses. Now, remember that Benveniste tells us that in the enunciation, in the verbal expression of something, language finds itself employed for the expression of a certain relation to the world. Not the expression of the world, because language is not the expression of the world, but the expression of a certain relation to the world, says Benveniste. It's a relation. It's a relational sign system. I do not exist until I signify the word I. And at the same time, I cannot exist until I signify oppositions to I. The things other than I exist when I signify I. When I signify I, then, and at the same time, things other than I, oppositions to I, exist. You, she, he. And at the same time, because of the fact that oppositions to I begin to exist, then I suddenly exist. I begin to exist, and not prior to that. So I and others all come into existence all at once. That is, culture comes into existence with the emergence of society all at once, and it comes into existence with the emergence of language all at once. So this implies, quite simply, that language emerges all at once as language and culture emerge simultaneously. Okay, so we are now going to wrap up and finish this discussion in our OMILIA series, our ongoing meetings in linguistic anthropology, and we will then continue next week with our discussion of Roman Jakobson.